Good morning, and welcome to the Board of Regents Tuition Task Force meeting. I'm Milt Dakovich, Vice Chair of the Task Force. We're holding these meetings to facilitate public discussion regarding the issue of tuition at Iowa's public universities. We will examine the core issues and strategies central to the process of setting tuition and very much welcome input from students, faculty, legislative and business stakeholders, university representatives, and the public. This is our third of 3 task force meetings. We have previously met at the University of Northern Iowa and at Iowa State University. They have been very productive meetings, and I'm sure this one will be also. The format today will start with a presentation of our Regents system as a whole, followed by the university's 5-year presentation. These should take about an hour. We will then take a 30-minute break, followed by a 1-hour open mic listening session for any stakeholders that wish to comment. This meeting will be live streamed and archived on the board's website, and the task force will provide a summary of these meetings to the full Board of Regents at its September meeting. Thank you very much for being here. At this time, I will ask Interim Chief Academic Officer Dr. Rachel Boone for her presentation.
Thank you. And I moved over here.
Oh, there she is.
Thank you, Regent Dakovich. I appreciate the opportunity to share some information with you. For those of you who have attended some of the prior meetings, there will be some familiar things here that will sound familiar, but the good news is all the research on memory tells us repetition is the #1 key to helping things stick. So for those of you for whom this is a repeat, there's a silver lining there. So I want to share with you a little bit more on the national context of what we've been talking about here in terms of tuition. There were some requests for some additional data to look at what the national context is. So we're going to do that today and dive a little more into that. The first goal that we've talked about through this whole process is here on the screen, and a couple other goals that we've talked about as well in terms of how we fulfill our public compact as a public system here in the state of Iowa. So these are the things that help us sort of center on what we're really trying to get at here by doing the work that the task force is doing. And if we're going to talk about the core strategies around tuition and what we're trying to accomplish, we have to start by looking at the context of our enrollment. It's a pretty important part of how we talk about this. And the trend over the last several years has been for enrollment growth. That's been at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level. And this is sort of looking at it as a system here for the state of Iowa. And then we look at just a 1-year snapshot there in terms of undergraduates in relation to residency of our students. And again, as a system, we are serving Iowans. 60% of those students that we're serving are Iowa residents. There's a wide range. Our institutions have anywhere from, say, 55 to 58% undergraduates to the high 80s at other institutions. So there's a wide variation in our institutions, but we are by and large serving Iowa residents with our undergraduate education. And the really excellent news is we're doing a great job of it. Iowa is leading the nation in terms of student outcomes, graduation rate outcomes for students full-time or part-time, starting full-time and part-time, I should say, starting at our institutions. Nation-leading outcomes in terms of graduation rates. And in fact, it's a 20 percentage point premium above the national average. So this is a pretty outstanding outcome. Now I want to pause and point out 2 things. One is, this is measured in terms of 6-year graduation rates. That is the national standard by which we can get comparative data across systems or across even at an institutional level. That does allow us to sort of account for the part-time students more effectively, as well as programs that might take an additional semester to get through based on their accreditation requirements. But it's also important to point out that we are tracking our graduation rates at the 4-year rate, at the 5-year rate as well, and the majority of students who complete do so in 4 to 4.5 years. One final thing I want to point out before we advance this is I want you to just notice the states that are clumped near the top and the bottom of this distribution. Up there near where Iowa is, you see New Hampshire, Virginia, there's California, Vermont, Connecticut, and near the bottom end, we see Nevada, Utah, Idaho, New Mexico, Arkansas. I'm going to come back to this, but just in terms of how the distribution of these graduation rates are, it's important to observe sort of who our neighbors are and who's on the other end of the spectrum from where we are. And similarly, you'll see the same states sort of clumped in those areas here on this one. This Iowa retains its #1 position here, and this is when we include those who maybe started at our institutions and then transferred. We are able to track their success at other institutions, and it turns out a lot of them are also completing within that 6-year time window. So maybe the change of major led them to leave, maybe a family situation, a personal health situation, any number of reasons why they may have left our institutions, but they're still highly successful students. So our system has done a really nice job of educating. Our state is doing a really nice job of educating those who desire to go to college. One final look at student success here is to talk about time to degree. I mentioned it earlier in terms of most of our students being in the 4 to 4.5 year completion time frame. And this is something that's been concentrated on by the institutions, and students and families are paying attention to this too because of the economic realities of paying for college. And there's been a really good progress and consistent progress in bringing that down. So this is, again, a very positive thing that our institutions have been able to accomplish. So these nation-leading student outcomes are happening in a funding context nationally that's been shifting. And it's shifting here in Iowa, and it's been shifting across the country. So this is a sort of an aggregate national look at this. And the bottom blue, the larger blue bars on the bottom that you see here are showing us the state appropriations that are provided to fund higher education nationally. The top section that's more in a green teal color, that's showing the net tuition revenue as a funding source. So 15 years ago, which is the far left of this, you see it's 68%, 2/3 coming from state appropriations nationally. Over that 15 years, it's continuously and consistently gone down, and now we're sitting at about 50% nationally. So this is a national trend in this direction, and the growth in terms of what's making up that difference is the tuition revenue. So this is a pretty common thing that we're seeing state after state and is playing out on the national scene. And similarly in Iowa, as I mentioned, we're doing the same thing. Now this is a longer time frame, which shows us how long this trend has really been occurring. It isn't just the last 15 years. However, the last 15 years has certainly accelerated, and we've seen it cross over in Iowa from being down to below 50% now for our institutions. So if we looked just at that same 15-year time slice there around 2001, where this picks up, we were at, say, 30% tuition, and now we're in FY17, we were up at 63%, based the source out of the revenue from tuition. So this is a pretty dramatic change, and the pace of it has clearly been faster than the pace has been in terms of the national aggregate trend. So we do pay for tuition. Students pay for their tuition through fees, tuition and fees that they get charged at either the resident level or the non-resident level. On this here, what we're looking at again is at a system level. So we're looking at the 50 states arrayed by their public university systems, and from high to low. So the lowest on the far end there, Wyoming, the highest on the other end, New Hampshire. There's a small green arrow showing you where to find Iowa in the bottom third in terms of these are arrayed high to low on resident tuition and fees. So Iowa is in the bottom third in the most recent year available, which is, again, 2016-17 here, in terms of how much is being charged. Now, I mentioned earlier we should talk about those states that are clustered at the top and bottom in terms of student outcomes. If we look at the far end here up by New Hampshire was number 2 behind us in terms of student outcomes. You see Vermont up there. A little bit further down, you find Virginia and Connecticut. They're all in the top 10 in terms of what they're charging. Those are our neighbors in terms of student outcomes. So the high performers with student outcomes, Iowa is a bit of an anomaly in terms of if you relate that to tuition and fees. The bottom end here, Wyoming, Florida, Montana, Utah, New Mexico, those are on the bottom of the tuition, resident tuition and fees. And interestingly, they were also near the bottom in the terms of the student success graduation outcomes. So it's an interesting way to look at that. The gold bars on top are the non-resident premiums that get paid. So the non-residents pay, what do they pay in addition to what residents are paying? And you see here Iowa does pop up a little higher now. Our neighbors in this area here, for resident tuition, it was South Dakota, Arkansas, Georgia, Missouri. Now it's Georgia still. North Carolina is more similar to Iowa in terms of that, what the non-residents pay, as well as that proportion between the two. Tennessee, much more like us in terms of how much non-residents are paying in that proportionality. So some southern states actually a little more like Iowa in that regard. The tuition and fee increases, which is something that we've been all paying a lot of attention to over the past 5 years, resident tuition fee increases. This is showing us what that percent of increase was. 5-year time period, what percent increase by state, by each of these state public systems. And again, the green arrow showing us where Iowa is, pretty small, blue bar there for Iowa. Very wide range here. Louisiana, extremely high. Washington, an 8% decrease, actually. These are highly keyed to their appropriations contexts. So when the states have had the ability to infuse a lot more resources, we've seen states that actually decrease tuition sometimes. When states go the other way, as in Louisiana, and I can name other examples as well, you see it go up much more dramatically very quickly. So Iowa's sort of common peers in terms of the rate of our increase in the last 5 years sound much more Midwestern now. Ohio, Indiana, Minnesota. These are states that are much more like us in terms of having some of our peer institutions in them as well, and of course regionally very close to us. So tuition and fees are often supported for students through their institutional financial aid they're able to receive. Our institutions, through a multi-year time period, have really put a dramatic increase in what they're committing, resources that they are committing to supporting students, both from need-based standpoint as well as merit-based standpoint. The growth here, if we looked at, again, we just looked at a 5-year period where we had a pretty small bar in terms of our percent increase in tuition and fees over that time for residents. The increase here that we see over the same 5-year period is about 45% increase in the amount of institutional funds being plowed into financial aid. That's somewhat accounted for by the fact that enrollment has gone up, but enrollment has not gone up 45% in that 5-year period. We have plowed more resources into financial aid proportionally than we have seen increases in tuition or increases in enrollment. This has been an institutional commitment, not just keeping pace, but exceeding pace. Unfortunately, the state of Iowa, which does offer need-based aid for students, has had a much lower commitment, about $3 million last year to Regent students. It's about 6% of the need-based aid dispersed by the state. Regent institutions serve 31% of the resident undergrads going to college in the state of Iowa and receive 6% of that need-based aid. It was pointed out to me by somebody who saw this presentation previously that the state ranks down in the corner really should be flipped and it should say 50, 49, 48, because that's really what we're looking at. Iowa puts the least amount of need-based aid into its public university students. So while it's showing there as number 1, it's really, unfortunately, the bottom in terms of the national commitment to need-based aid for university students. And the final way that we talk about quite often as students pay for their educations is through loans. It is important that that loans are available, and this makes college possible for a lot of students. However, it's also very important to point out that nearly a third of our undergraduates who earn their degrees from us leave with $0 in debt. That's important for them and their families, and the institutions also support having as few students taking out these loans as possible. So there's a lot of loan counseling that goes into that. For those who do receive debt, you can see over time we've had some decreases in the amount of debt that have been accruing, or flat. There's always going to be mild variance within that. But this is to remain flat at a time when tuition is going up, there are increases, is also a pretty big accomplishment. There has been a concerted effort at our institutions to do this through loan counseling efforts and through really thinking hard about the ways of packaging and the infusion of additional financial aid. So it's a multi-pronged approach to bringing debt down and controlling it, and the institutions, this shows, have been fairly successful at doing that. And the final thing, just as a reminder to show you, is in regards to financial literacy. And this, again, gets to the idea that we need to help students and families understand how they're funding their educations and what we can do to help support them making good decisions. The Regents have done an excellent job of really pushing the institutions to find ways to do this and with the students, and we're going to scale with a mandatory financial literacy training for all undergraduate students this year in the academic year 2017-18 that we're starting now. So this is a big accomplishment, and this is an important way that we're helping students, and this is aligned with our student success goals that we see in our board strategic plan and the institutional strategic plans. A student who is financially stressed is going to struggle more in classes than a student who has a grip on and a handle on how to manage this. We want the students to be able to really focus on their classwork, and this is one of the tools to help us do that. So all of these pieces put together are really the right building blocks for having a tuition strategy conversation. Because if we don't have solid institutional financial aid strategies, it makes it harder. If we don't have really good loan counseling to control debt for students, it makes it harder. And if we don't have financial literacy training for students, it makes it harder. So having these pieces in place really are enabling us to have a really robust conversation about what's the right strategy for us moving forward. So just a real quick wrap up with our ongoing priorities. Our institutions and the board is very committed to making sure that we're doing all of this work and having high quality teaching and learning opportunities available to all qualified Iowa residents. And this is one of the ways we're going to do that. We have had exceptional outcomes, nation leading outcomes so far. And in order to do that, we need to sustain those outcomes, we need to sustain sufficient resources to do that and avoid that tipping point where we maybe can't quite achieve as much as we can with the limited resources available. So I am happy to take any questions that you might have on the information I presented. Otherwise, I'm going to toss it over to President Harold and let him talk about his plan.
Are there any questions from the task force or other regions for Dr. Boone? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Rachel. Good presentation. President Harold, institution presentation.
No. Members of the task force, thank you for this opportunity to discuss the future of the University of Iowa. Rachel, let me begin by thanking you for your very thorough and well-researched overview of the landscape of higher education. There's no doubt that the issues that we face are present across the nation. Building on Rachel's observations, I would like to offer some further context, if you will, that will hopefully allow the task force, the rest of the board, our students, their families, the citizens of our state, and other constituents the ability to reflect and understand the predicament that we now find ourselves in. Education, and in particular public education, historically have been prized by our state. This is illustrated clearly by the one-room schoolhouse that is featured on the back of the State of Iowa Quarter. This commitment to excellence in the education of our young came not only from our political leaders, but also from families and communities all across Iowa. This commitment allowed Iowa to become a leader not only in the K-12 system, but also in higher education. When you think about the wonderful choices our students now have from 15 community colleges and over 25 private colleges and universities, to a comprehensive regional university, to 2 AAU Research 1 universities, our state of 3 million people is truly blessed. Unfortunately, the commitment to higher education is now waning and has been doing so for at least a decade. As I will discuss in a few slides, the result of this has been a sharp fall off in the quality of education across the state, and I believe now needs immediate attention. Thus, I applaud this opportunity to discuss these choices that are now in front of us. Before I begin, I'd like to provide a reminder and a caveat. One of the challenges we often face in these discussions is that we tend to focus on just one component of what I consider to be a very complex system. I would like to remind all of us that higher education in Iowa not only includes the region institutions, but also many fine private colleges and universities, as well as our community colleges. While not the primary purpose of today's tuition discussion, there is much to be gained by looking for academic and economic synergies across this entire system. At some point, we need to have a higher order discussion of the economic and governance opportunities if we are to optimize the use of our scarce resources in the state. After all, the stronger the overall system is, the better we will serve Iowans. Finally, those who came before us made a series of choices. The choices regarding enrollment size, selection of academic disciplines, student support, choices regarding admission requirements, and many more choices that all play a role in determining the fundamental requirements for institutions like ours. A choice in one area impacts others. Similarly, now Iowa faces a set of choices, and we must create our path that will set the future of higher education in our state. Bingo, thank you. This conversation was started actually quite a while ago, but for the last few weeks it's intensified, and I'm also appreciative of the time that everyone, all of us here, have spent on this important issue. As was discussed last week, each institution is very different, and I would like now to walk through the unique and specific issues we face at the University of Iowa. In doing so, I will play at the beginning, first of all, a short budget video, which will hopefully give you a quick insight and bring us up to speed. I would also like to discuss the specific process we've gone through to get here in discussing our budget, and review some important historical facts, review important forces that we now face, and then try to pull all this together by reviewing the highlights of our roadmap to excellence going forward. Here's the video. Is it going to launch? He said it would have.
For fiscal year 2018, the total University of Iowa budget is $4 billion. The university's revenue comes from multiple For fiscal year 2018, the total University of Iowa budget is $4 billion. The university's revenue comes from multiple sources. Several university enterprises are self-sustaining, meaning the revenue they generate stays within that unit to cover the costs they incur. University of Iowa Healthcare, athletics, housing and dining, and parking and transportation are all examples of self-sustaining units on our campus. Tuition and fees, state funding, and federal support make up the university's general education fund. This revenue determines how much money the university has to spend on student services, financial aid, faculty and staff salaries, and facility maintenance. While many programs, courses, and student services have been added over time, efficiency efforts have kept expenses from increasing. But nationally and in Iowa, financial support for public higher education has declined dramatically, shifting the cost of higher education from the state to the student. In fiscal year 1990, about 64% of the University of Iowa's general education fund came from state appropriations, while tuition accounted for about 28%. Over time, those numbers have reversed. The University of Iowa is working hard to earn highly competitive research grants, raise additional philanthropic support, and cut costs through efficiency. Grants and gifts are an important part of any university, but are typically restricted to the terms of the grant and the donor's wishes. Finding efficiencies allows the university to reinvest in its core mission of education and scholarship. The University of Iowa's administrative overhead is consistently lower than our peers. And today, the University of Iowa has among the lowest resident undergraduate tuition and fees in its peer group as well as the Big Ten. The University of Iowa is committed to sustainable budgeting that allows us to continue to provide an affordable and world-class education for our students.
So thank you for letting us, and thanks also to Rod, wherever you are. His voice, I'm sure all of us recognize. There he is. But what I'll now do is actually pull apart that various elements in the video and dive down into various pieces of it to give you more background. As Rachel pointed out in her presentation, as we saw in the video as well, the resource trend that we're facing here at the UI, along with our sister institutions, is in fact systemic. In other words, we did not get here in 1 year, nor will we reverse this trend in 1 or 2 years. Moving forward, we do have choices and the power to set ourselves on the correct path, but those choices must be informed with data. And here are some interesting facts on this slide. Over the past 20 years, one thing is clear: inflation reported as a consumer price index has increased while the support from the state has trended down. If state funding had kept up with inflation, we would have over $100 million more annually in resources. Again, these are choices that have been made over the last 20 years, but these choices now have consequences. Now, we all know that CPI is only one part of the equation. The other part is tuition. Here is a Cato Institute study released in February of this year, 2017. While I would not count the Cato Institute as being a huge proponent of spending more money on government programs, their data, which they obtained from the State Higher Education Executive Officers database, clearly illustrates the issues facing universities across our nation. While all states have had a decline in funding for their public higher education institutions, the 39 states, in fact, have increased by more than the state funding decline, increased their tuition by more than the state deappropriation, if you will. As you can see, however, Iowa is in the lower left quadrant, where tuition has not been raised sufficiently to offset state funding reductions. In fact, Iowa is one of only 11 states that has witnessed a reduction in total resources per student over the last 25 years. And unfortunately, our state is fifth from the bottom. As we'll see in a moment, this lack of resources has resulted in placing the UI in a competitive disadvantage with its national competitors, and has also had the impact upon our rankings and placed an unnecessary burden, I believe, on our students, their families, and the state's economy. We've walked through several broad aspects of our resource picture, and now I'd like to just turn specifically to tuition relative to the peers that the Board of Regents have asked us to benchmark against. Here you will note that Iowa ranks at the bottom in terms of resident tuition, and the third lowest for non-residents, roughly $4,000 below our peer average on both accounts. Just because you're low does not mean we should automatically, however, raise tuition, as we should be focused on a lot of other aspects of this important issue. That being said, it's quite clear that our ability to compete is based upon our ability to chase and complete our strategic plan. In order to implement that strategic plan, resources will be required, and tuition must, in fact, be part of that equation. An additional part of that resource equation is what we do with our scarce resources. Simply put, the less we spend on overhead costs while directing resources to where they will help our students the most, the better off we're doing. We as a university choose our strategic plan with a goal in mind of increasing our quality to benefit our students, the state, and nation. That choice came with subsequent actions that we have been executing internally. Directing resources to support the strategic plan and managing down our expenses was a significant part of our budget process this past year. This slide shows how we are ranked relative to our AAU publics, or another line relative to our regent peers, and also we've included all members of the Big Ten, as well as the IPEDS, which is a large data set of public universities. In all cases, we stack up fairly well. However, this is never enough. We have a specific target of continuing to take out $11 to $12 million every year through standardization, zero-basing activities, centralization, and automation. And actually, we've been doing this over many years, which is reflected here in this slide that shows that we now operate 14.5% more efficiently than our peers. Let me just remind you why this is so important. Here's a good example. As we discussed a couple of weeks ago, the University of Iowa expects a 0.5% increase in our general budget this year. That increase was not enough to fund the salary increases for our faculty to ensure that we keep the best and brightest on our campus teaching and doing important research. By continuing to focus on making our back office activities more efficient, our deans and VPs were able to repurpose these savings to making our salaries more competitive relative to our peers. These dots all connect. This is also reflected in a recent study done by American Council of Trustees and Alumni. They determined the average ratio of spending on administrative support as compared to spending on the core mission of education. This average for institutions like the UI is 0.17 per dollar. while the UI's ratio is 0.136, meaning more of our resources go directly to our academic mission than is the case for our competitors. We're very proud of our efforts to lower non-academic costs, and we will continue this effort since we believe it will be a critical competitive advantage that will pay off for our students, their families, only, however, if the university is resourced appropriately to begin with. And even during these challenging economic times, UI has done some great work without increasing overall costs when adjusted for inflation. What you're looking at is a great example of delivering outcomes for our students in an efficient manner. For well over 20 years, the University of Iowa has been able to maintain the real cost of educating our students. Clearly, the focus on managing down our expenses has paid off for Iowans. Unfortunately, this cannot continue ad nauseum. Even with these efforts, we've now come to a point in which the quality of the education, the competitiveness of the higher education marketplace, and the subsequent outcomes students and parents demand and deserve are now forcing us to reconsider the choices before us. Let's look at this now. As you know, the UI benchmarks itself nationally through a peer set. We've already seen some of that. And we do that so that we understand how we are stacking up against the universities similar to us. These national benchmarks allow us to determine how we are competing on a national stage and significantly impact whether top students and faculty will choose our university as places to study or work. Membership in the AAU is the gold standard in the world for top research universities like the University of Iowa. All of our peers are members of this group, and with only 62 top universities as members in the world, we take great pride in being a member of this institution and have been since 1909. Unfortunately, over the past 10 years, the University of Iowa has fallen from roughly the middle of the pack when benchmarked against this group to now the lower 25th percentile. Similarly, we have fallen 18 places in the U.S. News and World Report rankings, and our graduation rates, while high in Iowa, now are 12% below our national peers. Not the national average, but the peer set we benchmark against. This national comparison is important to our graduating students as well. Our students will be competing against graduates from Wisconsin, Michigan, Texas, North Carolina, and many others in their careers, and will work for businesses competing against companies from Wisconsin, Michigan, Texas, North Carolina, as well as many international firms. This is the reason we must continue to compare ourselves to our national competitors, because our graduates will be competing against the rest of the world, and the quality and reputation of the degree will matter, not just today, but into the future. With a focus on student success, it is vital that we illustrate where we need to improve in order to focus our resources. Here you'll see how we stack up against key student success metrics versus our peers. Let me be clear about this data. While at the bottom it shows that relative to this group, we have room to improve. On a national basis, we are performing 81% in retention rate and 35% for four-year graduation rates. So nationally, relative to the averages, we're doing quite fine. However, relative to the peers we aspire to and the regions have asked us to benchmark against, we have some room to improve. And in a sense, being just okay nationally, I don't believe is good enough for Iowans. If performing at the national average is all we aspire to, then the efforts made by those who came before us would have been made in vain. We at Iowa are driven to compete with the best, and as such, we will continue to focus on a peer set and work to achieve levels above the numbers you see here. This means that we have work to do. We have a lot of work to do to achieve in order to deliver the quality our students and their families expect and deserve. When we think about that national competition and how we can help our students be prepared, we need to focus on those delivering the educational experience. Put simply, our faculty. We must first retain our great faculty, and then we need to recruit great faculty to join them. By investing in those that deliver the education and perform the world-class research and scholarship, our students will be prepared for future success. Now, here's the harsh reality we must all face up to. We're dramatically being outspent by our peers. For example, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, a similarly sized institution with a little more than 29,000 students, is significantly better resourced than we. With a resident tuition similar to the UI's and a non-resident tuition significantly higher, UNC has more tuition revenue than the UI, but here's the big difference. The University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill receives $482 million more from their state each year, which is over twice what we receive. Please note that the student outcomes at the bottom of this page, I don't think, are an accident. This scenario plays itself out over and over again in a similar fashion across the nation, both in state tuition as well as state appropriations. On average, relative to the peer set the Board of Regents has asked us to compare ourselves to, the UI is dramatically under-resourced, on average by $91 million in tuition and almost $200 million in state funding. That's $291 million per year. If this continues, we will struggle to recruit and retain top faculty, top students, maintain our top student support programs, all of which will impact student outcomes and the educational opportunities, not just for today, but for long periods of time into the future. So where do we go? How do we get out of this? Well, at the UI, we've been working for the past year and a half in a very collaborative way with our shared governance and academic leadership on a plan that will move us towards excellence. Excellence for our students and excellence for the families and the residents of the state of Iowa. Over this past year, we've developed a detailed strategic plan to deliver excellence in everything we do. All elements of our community have been involved in this process, and while it's been exhausting and challenging at times, without this collaborative campus-wide process, we simply put would not be in a position to stand before you today confident in our ability to return the University of Iowa to the stature Iowans deserve. In particular, I would like to point out that we've agreed on 4 key budget principles that we've now used to review the university's budget line by line. They are the 4 in that first box on the left. In conjunction with that review, the campus empowered our deans to make key decisions regarding the effective use of resources. Why the deans? Well, quite simply, they're closer to the day-to-day issues and opportunities facing our students, faculty, and staff. This full process has now allowed the campus to align resources identified through the budget review to drive towards implementation of the University of Iowa's strategic plan. As part of this process, we created what we call the Collegiate Economic Analysis, or CEA. By looking at the different finances of each of our collegiate units and those units that support them, we now have a much better understanding of the puts and takes within our university. We discovered at least 3 important issues during this process. First, each of our colleges have unique economic models. The resources required to support a first-class dental college vary significantly from, say, our top-notch College of Law. Therefore, we all must be careful in comparing the 3 regent universities, as each has very different academic and research activities. Instead, each institution should be compared to its appropriate peers of like composition. The second key issue we discovered during the process is that 40% of our costs are shared. It's what we call, on the bottom part of this slide, it's become affectionately known as the mighty middle. Activities such as finance, human resources, IT, classroom space, career counseling, they're all shared across this institution. And while I haven't seen a thorough analysis on this issue relative to the several institutions I have, however, talked to about this, 40% appears to be a very high percentage. Now, this is a powerful and actually positive attribute. This cost sharing has allowed us to continue to survive during a period of lower funding than our peers and provides an important cultural foundation, I believe, for pursuing new interdisciplinary opportunities. It also means that as we pour more resources in, if we're so lucky, they will go directly to the key research and support of students rather than to the back office activities. The third key discovery is how different the financing of the university has become over the past 2 decades, and it's been well noted already here by Rachel, as well as my introductory remarks. So let's return to our strategic plan. The UI strategic plan, if and when funded, will allow the UI to compete nationally, which will have a direct and profound impact on our students, whether they be undergraduate, graduate, or professionals. Each of these yellow boxes we've analyzed in detail. These students and graduates are desperately needed in our state, I believe, as we recently saw in the Future Ready Iowa report. As you know, we have communities across this state desperate for well-trained professionals that graduate every year within the health sciences, law, education, engineering. And without a competitive education, these graduates could not become the leaders that Iowa communities and companies need to thrive and grow. In particular, I'd like to point out that the investment we intend to make in research and scholarship on the UI campus. These resources directed toward enhancing our standing in research and scholarship will have a direct and profound impact upon our students, their success. Recruiting and retaining the faculty and scientists that will drive our research enterprise means our students will have access to more opportunities, which I will describe in more detail in a moment. Said another way, research and teaching are interconnected in this community. The other benefit of this investment would be an increase in the amount of both federally sponsored and non-federal research investments across our campus. This in turn drives more economic growth in the state as we hire more university employees, develop more intellectual property, and create new startups within our community. Iowa desperately needs economic growth, and I believe our major research universities can play an important positive role, much more than they have in the last decade. This slide talks about high-impact practices. High-impact practices for students are a prime example of the types of investments that will occur with an increase in resources. It is the goal of the UI strategic plan that the UI graduates participate in at least 3 high-impact practices, such as internships, undergraduate research, capstone projects, leadership development, just to name a few. It is through these practices that students become more connected to the campus and enhance their educational experience, and that will then increase retention rates and 4-year graduation rates. We sometimes, somehow, find it convenient to think this is just about the classroom. This is a residential community. Much more goes on here than just in the classroom, and we need to engage our students 24/7 in these types of activities to deepen their connections to their future careers. As we do so, retention and graduation rates have a wonderful pattern of going up. Undergraduate research with world-class scholars is another wonderful example of a high-impact practice. Here's an example. Our Department of Physics and Astronomy has been one of the jewels for the UI for decades, and that shine continues. With 38 undergraduate research projects, the department is actively engaged in enhancing the learning experience of our students. And simply put, if you are an undergraduate or interested in space exploration, you need to be a Hawkeye. Yet it's not just the number of research projects, it's the faculty that help lead these students. Faculty such as Don Gurnett, who's a member of the National Academy of Sciences and a world-renowned leader in this field. Professor Gurnett is an exemplar of taking his research and scholarship and transitioning it to the classroom. This long-term investment the UI has made in faculty like Professor Gurnett continues to pay off for our students and their futures, and we must continue this legacy of excellence. We are focused not only on retaining our best and brightest, but recruiting the best and brightest to teach and perform research and scholarship. Investment in new faculty is key to the future success of our students, as these new faculty will be on the cutting edge in their particular areas. Our faculty, as just illustrated, are prime factors in the success of our students, and as such, investment into keeping the best and brightest is of paramount importance. As I mentioned earlier, the UI has recently announced a $4.8 million investment to strategically increase the average of meriting UI faculty salaries to 95% of the 2016 average of our peers. Here's why we did this. The chart in front of you shows how our salaries in each college are compared to our peers before these increases took effect. Those in black benchmarked in the bottom third. We will continue to update the board on our progress in this problematic area, and it has resulted in significant talent loss. Over 90 per year over the last 2 years, 90 faculty members per year over the last 2 years have left us. It's a trend we must fix, and we will. This yearly salary adjustments will on average equalize our compensation and provide a significant forward step on an important segment of our strategic plan. By staying competitive with our peers on compensation, we'll be able to recruit and retain the very best and brightest faculty. Top faculty drive world-class scholarship and ensure Iowa students have the opportunity to learn from the best. As shown in the previous slide, the UI is focused on maximizing our existing resources to support the strategic plan. To that end, as I said earlier, we've committed to finding $11 to $12 million each year of incremental cost savings, and then we will reinvest it in the success of our students. The UI's commitment to this goal will require significant commitment from all the stakeholders across our campus to continually streamline our operations. Reinvestments of this level is a good start, but it's not going to be enough for us to actually implement the specific elements of this strategy. If we are to move forward towards excellence in implementing our strategic plan, choices will need to be made on tuition. We have a good handle on what it will cost to implement our strategic plan. We understand what we can do internally with incremental resources in order to invest in the strategic plan over the next 5 years. We're now at a point in which a choice will need to be made about what quality of an institution we want to be and how we will support the success of our students. Increasing tuition is never easy. It's not something that anyone ever wants to do, particularly because of the impact and the burden it places on our students and their families. The proposed plan shown here does ensure critically needed predictability and affordability, and it's especially when compared to our peers. However, we certainly understand the challenges related to increasing tuition. That's why we are committed to maintain our focus on first-generation students and increasing our need and merit-based student aid. A careful balance between an increase in tuition and appropriate scholarship will help mitigate the impact upon those that may be struggling with the cost. Here you see the specific proposed tuition increase, which are designed to get our in-state and non-resident tuition just to the current average of our peer group, not the future average. Over a 5-year period, these calculations will get us to today's current average. I'm quite confident that our competitors will continue to increase their tuition. So we're not actually gaining, we're gaining ground on them, we're not catching them. Also note, this analysis assumes no reduction from the current levels of state appropriation. Its current reduced level from 232 for us to 216. We at the university appreciate all of this dialogue and engagement regarding the needs of our university. The data is clear. For us to be a university of a caliber that is expected by our students, families, and alumni, some clear choices now need to be made. Simply put, it all boils down to a choice. If Iowans believe, as they historically have, that higher education is a public good, then universities must be funded accordingly to ensure the quality they expect. If not, then let us compete. Let us compete with our peers by creating the resources needed to ensure the quality expected through every possible solution. A non-decision, I don't believe, is even feasible, and it's frankly unacceptable. We either need to stand up as Iowans and decide that this is a public good, or let these institutions compete in their own right. Thank you for your time. and I'd be glad to take any questions, comments that you may have.
Thank you, President Harold. Task Force, other regions, board staff, questions? Regent Bates.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, President Harold. In Dr. Boone's first presentation, she stated that the state has done an excellent job of educating those students who so wish to be educated. That, along with financial aid and for those need-based, can you talk a little bit more about how that will come to pass, what you look at? I come from a rural area where there is not always a lot of money, but there is a lot of want, and there is a lot of hope that they can obtain that education here at Iowa. So could you talk about that a little bit?
I'd be glad to, and then invite our provost to join me in this. We're at a very interesting time right now, as we literally today on this campus. Started last night. Those of you that live in the area probably all noticed that we couldn't get into restaurants last night. Parking is a little more intense. This is the transition period. And I think we at times have just said, let's just throw them in the classroom. And several years ago, we started to realize that's not a good model. And so back to these high impact practices and how we bring people, if you will, from other parts of the state, or actually yesterday afternoon, we had several students from all around the world, many, many countries represented. How we transition them into our community and to our level of education and scholarship is very, very important. And so I think it begins actually just during this period we're now in. So if we have a group that's called Iowa Edge. Some of us met with them yesterday evening and their families. Because part of it's not only what's happening to the student, but it's also what's happening back home. And the student's not going to be as available as they always were. They're going to come home at Thanksgiving and have homework and need to work on their papers. And often 21% of our students are first-generation students to this day. And helping their families understand what their son or daughter is going through and and the support system they can provide back in their homes when the student's back or calls is really different than what they've expected. So there's a lot at the beginning of transition. But then let's go beyond that, because I think what we also need to do is, I was saying the analogy, remember the old, I think it was paper chase, we look left, look right, someone's not going to be here. We were saying that's not the case here. Our job is to make sure you stay here. And so this introductory period is a part of that, but actually the academic advising programs that we have in place, and we're simply put out of mess kits with we need more. We need them guiding, better training in that area. We need more of them, and it's not just the first year or two. I think it goes beyond the first couple of years. And then students do get into trouble, and they start finding that they get pulled into other activities on campus. So the busier we have them, one of the things we've been trying to do, and more recently, is the more engagements we have across campus on the weekends and the evenings. And some of that's not academic, but just engaging them in healthy activities keeps them from drifting, if you will. Then when they do get lost, the ability to mentor them and tutor them back onto the track. So it's a system. I keep looking at these things. We try to find one simple answer and say, oh, that's it. No, it's a whole network of things. I'm so glad that we recently, Melissa Shivers is in the audience, Tom Rockland's replacement for Student Life, but she and I in the last month and a half, and actually in recruiting, the one thing I kept saying, let's deal with the other 60% of the students' life here. And they're here. If it were simple as just classroom, here we go online. There's a reason, and that other 60, the reason they're here, and that 60% of time needs to be productive, and the better off we are. All this high impact practice, all that's connected to bringing this, acclimating, matriculating, if you will, those students. Sue, what did I?
No, I think you covered a lot of what I would have said. I heard your question partly about affordability. And so I think that, this is where the investment in financial aid is really important. It's also important, and I'm going to echo what President Harold said, when students come here, if you come here and you invest family resources in tuition and you don't graduate, that's not a good thing. And so I think the most important thing is to help people make it affordable, but also if you're going to make this investment, you want to succeed. And we are just foundationally committed at the University of Iowa to the success of our students, and it goes beyond the classroom. It goes to the expectations that we put on our faculty. So I think that the whole package is here.
And I ignored the financial side, and that's the reason Sue's here. And to me, I've said this, we talk a lot about this. First of all, the data which Rachel had is absolutely correct, but the title that we sometimes forget on the slide is of the students who have debt. A very important question is, what percentage of your students have debt? And, you know, if technically, by the way we calculate this, if one student had debt, and it was $26,000, our average debt for the students who have debt would be $26,000. So our debt is about 50-50. I think it's 53%. I can't remember if it's do or don't, but let's just say it's 50-50. And so our average debt for all students is more like 13.5, somewhere in there. But the one thing we can do, all of us can do, is get them out of here in 4 years with a degree and get them into the work environment. Because if you extend those numbers for another couple of years, to Sue's point, it just really, it becomes debilitating. So the faster we can get them out of here, and then our placement center plays a big role now as well. So yeah, I understand these are big numbers, but also the more we do to help them get through here successfully and on time, we can make those, I think, numbers manageable. And then we have now, so let's be clear, the numbers I showed include a concomitant increase in student financial aid. We can't just take up tuition and not also set aside, if you will, an appropriate amount for student financial aid. That's in our plan. Merit as well as student financial aid. And we're committed to keeping our community enrollment of 20% or more in first-generation students. But I think we can strategically target it. What we've been doing is washing it across with this averageness of low tuition, and I think we ought to be more thoughtful about how we use it. Sorry. Thanks.
Regent Butker.
Thank you. Thank you for the excellent presentation. And I really appreciate the comments that you have just made about student success and student life. That's crucial to me. I do have a question on criteria used for establishing your predictable tuition for in-state versus out-of-state. What kind of criteria did you use for establishing these recommendations?
Bear with me for a second. You got to imagine we have 11 colleges. They're all in slightly different positions relative to their competitors, in-state and out-of-state. In some cases, we're actually maxed out relative to our peers in terms of pricing, in a few. In many, it's the opposite. So we try, and by the way, to get really wonky for a moment, it's not just undergraduate. We also need to look at graduate schools. And so we've gone through the whole milieu, if you will, a whole spreadsheet. And what we really tried to do is where we thought we had the ability to maintain pricing pressure upward, that's what you see in this. And we encouraged our deans to think about it in terms of getting to the average of their peers, current average, within 5 years. So that was a key variable. But in some cases, we did not, because we said we can't take it, we can't price ourselves out of the market. We also, so we tried to do that with resident and non-resident. We tried to, in the way the numbers play out is because we're so low on resident relative to non-resident, the percentages, you can see the percentages, we have more pricing pressure, opportunity in the current resident market than we do in non-resident. We're at a place where, and I'm sure our students will mention this later, we're at a place where we've been, in a sense, reaching out of state more aggressively, and we've just about reached the limit on that. We've got some, you'll see it. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we continue. I'm very comfortable that this current plan will allow us to get the quality of students, the number of students, and that we're not pricing ourselves into a problem at the end of this in each of the schools. But you'll see that so what we tried to do is be thoughtful about those dynamics in each cell of this, and that was the result of it. I think there's two ways that I find it fascinating. And I'm veering away from your question, but it does trigger a point, which is that I find there are two ways to price yourself out of market. One way is to get your prices up so high that no one is interested in your institution. We're far from that. The other way is that you keep it so low you can't provide the quality that the institution demands. We put more of a premium on getting a quality and excellence in thinking about how to price this is maybe another way to come at that. That answer?
Somewhat, but,
Nope, Sue's going to add.
So there's three things that I would say. That what we saw in the table reflects base tuition. And we compared our base tuition in-state and out-of-state to our peers. And the goal is to be at the average of our peers where they are now. The second was to spread that rise predictably and manageably across a 5-year period. I guess those are the two main points. Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions? Regent Johnson.
You alluded in your comments to Regent Butker about enrollment. So where do you see your enrollment going over the next 5 years? And what plan is in place for that enrollment? And additionally, this is like a 3-part question, I apologize. And additionally, where do you see the split of in-state versus out-of-state students going as well?
These are all really important questions. Given the resource issues that we face, about a year ago, I just put a stake in the ground, and we should discuss it at some point. But I said we cannot dramatically increase the size of this institution and maintain all the quality issues. So this plan basically has us right around the excuse me, same size where we are now. And there may be a little up and a little down, but it's a little up and a little down. It's not a strategic, let's go grow the University of Iowa. This is a maintain the size, dramatically increase the quality and excellence of the plan. There could be some shift year by year. I think if we continue to get our quality up, I think our graduate program could continue to increase in professional side somewhat in that. And it is not a material shift. We're right now right at a little higher percentage of Iowans and non-residents. It's still a 50-50 plan. So this is basically the same sort of mix, maybe a little leaning into the graduate and professional programs over the next several years as we continue to get our quality where it needs to be. Great.
Other questions? Anybody else? Okay, very good. Thank you for those presentations. We ran a little bit over in time. We'll take the half hour and we will reconvene back here at 12:05. Thank you. Okay, we will start our 1-hour listening session, and I'd like to start with student government, the undergraduate. Please, thank you.
My name is this working? Is it good? Okay.
It's supposed
cool.
to be.
Just checking. Hello, my name is Jacob Simpson, and I serve as the University of Iowa Student Body President. I am one of 24,000 undergraduates who attend this university, and like many, I chose to join this community because of its respected academic programs, its humbly ambitious culture, and its affordability. Before I get too far into comments, I would like to highlight how we've made progress over the past few months. First, the Board of Regents and the Tuition Task Force have started this necessary discussion that has been absent for far too long. President Richards and Regent McKibben, who's not here, I'd like to thank you for having this open dialogue about the future of the University of Iowa. Second, the proposed 5-year plan is a legitimate attempt at establishing predictability for students. And then finally, the proposed plan treats residents and non-resident students similarly, with increases based on absolute dollars rather than percentages. President Harold has ushered in a narrative of excellence at the University of Iowa, which I applaud. I believe in the narrative and the necessity of holding ourselves accountable to it. We must choose to be excellent in research and service, excellent in teaching and academic support, excellence in inclusion and justice for all people, and excellent in affordability. Across the nation, universities face funding challenges because of decreased public support, particularly in our state. The usual response has been to increase tuition and make up for what was lost and then some. This is the kind of proposal we have in front of us today, and I believe this proposal is not one of excellence. For our tuition to become as expensive as our peers is mediocrity, and raising tuition by 7% over 5 years is not our only solution to the problem we face. As President Harold has noted, we have the opportunity to save millions on efficiencies each year, to increase our shared services, and to demand more returns from the foundation. And with regards to state appropriations, I would argue that the Board of Regents and the university have untapped potential for lobbying on behalf of our public institutions. Compared to other universities, our political engagement has room to grow, and I would add that we have not effectively made our case to the general Iowan about why they should fund our institutions. If excellence is what we want, then we must be leaders in higher education by not looking to tuition and solely comparing ourselves to our peers to solve institutional problems when there are action steps we can take to control our future. To be clear, I support moderate tuition increases over 5 years so that the university does not suffer from a lack of resources while we begin to take advantage of the alternative revenue generation opportunities I just listed. Though as tuition increases, financial aid must be configured so that students who need the support receive it. Financial aid may be increasing proportionally to tuition, but that does not rid the issues that students already face. Last year, 55% of need was met by loans, and 45% was met by grants and scholarships. Beyond our commitment to decreasing student loan debt, this balance of financial aid is critical to improving student success. For example, each semester, students are not allowed to register for the next semester if they have more than $100 on their U-bill. And last semester, there were 66 students with need who had less than $1,500 on their U-bill and were not able to register for the next semester. There must be more than proportional increases to financial aid because every $100 counts for students in need. Now, my final point is about student success. Faculty are important for student success, but they are not the driver of student success. Students drop out because they cannot pay for tuition, books, housing, and food. They drop out because they do not have enough academic and student support. They drop out because they do not feel like the community is welcoming. Ask our student success professionals in the Office of Academic Support and Retention. The quality and number of faculty are not the drivers of student success. Therefore, if student success is really what we care about, we must invest more in student success initiatives like financial aid, student employment, academic support, on and off-campus student support, student success data analytics, and community inclusion and justice, rather than faculty hiring and compensation. I meet with many student success professionals who have great ideas but do not have the funding to implement them. This plan provides us the opportunity to invest in strategic areas of student success, and the opportunity cannot be wasted because of how the AAU and US News define a good university. To summarize, the university should strive to maintain our affordability by taking advantage of alternative revenue generation strategies. Financial aid must increase more than proportionally so that students in need may excel here. And finally, we must be honest about the drivers of student success and invest in the initiatives that will make a real impact. I appreciate your attention to these issues and your dedication to improving higher education in Iowa. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob, for your comments. Graduate student government? Anybody? Faculty Senate.
Hi, my name's Pete Snyder, and I'm a born and raised Hawkeye. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, and I graduated from the University of Iowa College of Medicine. I left Iowa for some of my medical training, but came back and have been a faculty member here for 21 years. This year, I have the honor to serve as president of the University of Iowa Faculty Senate, and I want to thank the members of the task force and the other members of the Board of Regents for being here today, for taking on this issue, and for coming here to listen to our views. I've always been very proud of the high value that Iowa places on education. Iowa's been a national leader in this regard. This is something that I highlight when I travel to other universities and when I'm recruiting students and faculty to the University of Iowa. Our emphasis on the value of education has been an enormous benefit to our citizens. It's made Iowa a center of creativity and innovation, and it has provided a competitive advantage for recruiting workers and businesses to the state. However, I'm worried that as a state, we're losing this value. We have disinvested in our public universities in a way that jeopardizes our future. Like most of our faculty, I have several roles here at University of Iowa. As a cardiologist, I care for patients at University of Iowa hospitals and clinics. I teach students, residents, and fellows, and I conduct research into the underlying causes of hypertension. It is this research mission that sets our public universities apart. Our faculty are making discoveries that will improve the lives of our citizens. This gives us hope that our children and grandchildren will have a better future. Our research also provides more immediate, tangible benefits. It creates new businesses that produce jobs and attract talent to the state. But just as importantly, our research has an enormous impact on the education of our students. Most of our students are exposed directly to cutting-edge research as part of their education. They conduct research in our labs, they do honors projects with our faculty, and they learn directly from these faculty in the classroom. This gives our students access to information that has not yet reached the textbooks. This research-intensive education also helps many of them make a seamless transition into our graduate and professional programs, where we train the next generation of doctors, dentists, nurses, pharmacists, lawyers, professors, business leaders, and other professionals that will serve the citizens of our state. All of this requires resources. From my perspective as a faculty member, we need resources to recruit talented faculty to the University of Iowa, and we need resources to keep them here. This includes resources for competitive salaries and resources to equip our research labs. The University of Iowa and our sister institutions have been under-resourced for a number of years. This has had a number of negative consequences, including the loss of talented teachers and researchers to other institutions. But what perhaps is most important, if we continue down this path, it will deprive Iowa students of the education that they deserve. Our children should not have to leave Iowa to get a first-rate education. They should be able to get it right here. The strength of our public universities should also be a focal point to attract talented students, faculty, and staff to our state, and a reason why they want to build their careers here in Iowa. I support President Harold's plan for predictable tuition growth over the next 5 years. I also encourage the Board of Regents and our citizens to call on our legislature to reinvest in public higher education in Iowa. Thank you.
Thank you. Legislators. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Thank you so much and good afternoon. My name is John Laverty and I serve as president of the UI Staff Council. On behalf of the 7,300 professional and scientific and other non-bargaining staff at the University of Iowa, I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm a native and lifelong Iowan, raised in Manning, Callender, if any of you know where that's at, and Fort Dodge, and I now reside in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Though they did not graduate from college themselves, my parents and grandparents understood the importance of higher education. They embraced the truth that the future of each of us individually and of the state as a whole relied on high quality and affordable public education. All three of my parents' children were first-generation college students, and all three of us graduated from Iowa's Regents universities with undergraduate, graduate, and professional degrees. I am now the father of a UI alumna and a current sophomore. I know firsthand the importance of high quality and affordable public higher education and that it's more crucial than ever. But the actions of our state government make me question whether our state elected leaders continue to support this core value of Iowans. It's clear that the people of Iowa do support this value. A couple of weeks ago, I traveled across the state on RAGBRAI and with the University of Iowa team from small farming communities to larger towns with strong industrial bases. We met multi-generational farmers, new immigrants to Iowa, people from all faiths and varied heritages. As our UI team introduced ourselves, we heard thousands of thank yous. Thank yous for providing their community with well-trained health professionals, appreciation for entrepreneurial business students who helped their town develop business plans, kudos for the teachers in their children's classrooms, gratitude for the scholarships that allowed them to receive an outstanding education, thank yous from Cyclone and Panther fans, and thank yous from young and old. Thank yous for so many things. Attracting and retaining high-caliber faculty is critical to providing the world-class education, research, healthcare, service, and economic generation that Iowans have every right to expect. The quality of our faculty has a direct impact on the education we provide, the value of our graduates' degrees, and the financial future and reputation of our state. As UI staff leaders, we applaud President Harold and his efforts to keep faculty salaries competitive with our peer institutions. As UI staff leaders, we also know it will take more than continual low to no salary increases to attract and retain high-caliber staff. The staff who support students outside of the classroom, as we've heard about from the student leaders, who help them navigate the financial implications of attending college, who assist them in preparing for leadership and career opportunities, who advise them to choose appropriate courses, and who counsel and treat them when they face mental or physical health issues. Staff are also crucial to our cutting-edge research labs, assisting with grant writing, maintaining sophisticated equipment, ensuring legal compliance, mentoring students, and so much more. The creative arts, libraries, computer infrastructure, University of Iowa hospitals and clinics, every department and function on the UI campus are dependent upon staff support, expertise, and commitment and dedication. Our efforts impact more than students. We touch lives throughout the state. As you consider all the financial resources that go towards supporting the Regents universities, including tuition, please know that UI staff leadership stands behind reasonable, predictable, and potentially differentiated tuition increases to meet the needs of our students and the expectations of Iowans. Respectfully, thank you so much.
Thank you. Legislators.
Good afternoon. Joe Bolcom. There are a number of legislators here. I'm pleased to be joined by them, and I hope some come to the mic. Thank you for the opportunity to present a couple comments on the proposed funding plan for our public universities. Clearly, challenging times for education in Iowa, especially for our public universities and community colleges. We've gone through the last 7 years of very difficult funding cycles. Over the past 7 years, our public universities and community colleges have experienced historic declining and lack of state financial support. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been drained away from higher education. So here we are, and we're on the campus at the University of Iowa, but as the members of the board know, you've been on the other campuses, and the story's the same. So we're here today turning to students and their families to take up the slack. The proposed 7% increase for the next 5 years will no doubt increase student debt, decrease access, especially to low-income students and their families, and make it more difficult for first-generation students. By the way, I continue to be kind of amazed that approximately 25% of the students on this campus last year were first-generation students, and nearly 30% Iowa State were first-generation students. This proposal will make it harder on those kids. I do appreciate the rationale that's been delivered today and the case that was made on the slides earlier. To have excellent public universities, they need resources. But I have to say, I strongly oppose the rate of increase. I recognize tuition is going up. I think 7% is too high. Family incomes are not increasing at 7% a year. But as I think more broadly about that proposal, and I recognize the rationale for it, is we need to take care of ourselves because we're not getting the support we need from the governor and the legislature. This proposal throws in the towel on the people of Iowa who have helped build these institutions, and I think it throws in the towel on the governor and the legislature's responsibility to support our public universities. That said, it's a rational plan. As higher education support has plummeted, corporate tax giveaways to large profitable companies have grown at historic rates. The primary reason for higher education and really education funding decline, and if we were talking about K-12, we'd be lamenting some of the same issues, but the primary reason for decline in education funding, especially higher education, is runaway tax giveaways that have been self-inflicted by the governor and the General Assembly. I brought one example today that compares there are a bunch of credits, bunch of tax plans. We've got like 30-plus different ways we give incentives to businesses. This is one. This is something we do for research and development. And it compares over the last 7 years the money that's gone to large profitable Iowa companies who are some of our best employers, who we want to be profitable and employ Iowans. And it compares it to the decline in funding to the universities and the community colleges. And it shows that we've given away about $230 million, as we've seen, just $100 million in decline to higher education funding. This is the most generous research credit in the country. It gives refund checks to companies. We wrote $231 million in refund checks to Deere and Rockwell and Pioneer and Monsanto, companies that paid no state income taxes, and then we all wrote them a check that you helped pay for. We can have a really good research credit, one of the best in the country, and probably save $40 million. We could fix this in January when we go back to session. This is one example of kind of tax credits gone wild. These companies, of course, are some of the best employers. We love them all. Let me be clear about that. We love the companies, but it's unsustainable. We can't afford it unless we're going to balance the budget of the public universities on our students. More effort needs to be made to take the case to Iowans. What's at stake? You showed some slides today. What's at risk of being lost? Most people don't have a clue. Why should it matter to every Iowan? I think that's where the board and our presidents need to step up, because we're struggling with the 150 people that go over to the Capitol, but I can guarantee you that the families that are going to be impacted by the 7% increase, they're going to need to know why you're proposing such a great increase, and it's not clear to the average Iowans. In closing, I'd say I fear this proposal, unfortunately, is another step towards privatization of our public universities. It's basically letting the state and the governor off the hook for their responsibility, a historic responsibility over a very long time. So you're in a difficult spot. You've presented what appears to be a rational proposal, given all the other things out in the world, but I encourage you not to throw the towel in on the people of our state who have built these institutions and want to continue to see them accessible to every Iowa kid that has a dream to come here or one of the other two institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Balcom.
Good afternoon. I'm State Representative Mary Masher, and I'm from the Iowa City and graduated from the University of Iowa, proud graduate. President Harold, you talked a lot about the whole issue of financial support for students who now can't afford or won't be able to afford to attend our universities. I would like the regents to look at, and Sherry, you alluded to that as well, I would like the regents to look at our athletic budget. I do think that we need to be devoting more of the dollars, and I know that's self-sustaining, and you identified that early on as well, but there are revenues that come from that budget that I think should go back to the students, because the university athletic program wouldn't be here without those students. And I think it's important for us to recognize that, and recognize that we need to put a certain amount of money aside from those revenues towards those scholarships and funding to support those students who will or may not be able to afford the university as a result of these increases in tuition. So I would ask you to look at that and very seriously consider that at all of the institutions, because again, I think we need to look at how can we make it more affordable, and that's one of the ways to go about it. So thank you for being here. We appreciate the task force work, and hope you'll consider that in your deliberations. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Senator Todd Bowman from Maquoketa. I serve on the Education Committee in the Senate, and I think I confirmed all of you that are here today. So I know you, and I appreciate your hard work, your dedication to the state of Iowa in this tough role that you're serving in. And so just a little bit about myself. Not only am I a senator, but I'm the only active educator in the Senate. And I teach dual enrollment classes, and so almost all of my students will be going to a college. And so I look into their eyes and I think about, are we going to be able to provide them affordable college opportunities? And coming today and hearing about the proposal, it makes my heart beat a little too fast. 35% increase over 5 years is an incredible amount. And certainly I would support some moderate increases in tuition, responsible increases in tuition, but we also have a burden as legislators to budget responsibly to make sure that college opportunities remain affordable for all students. And so I think most of you will remember when we had our individual meetings prior to your confirmation, I begged you to do more advocating for the budget purpose for maintaining responsible tuition. And, you know, when I hear from constituents, this is a big issue. I'm not sure it's getting through all the way up to our governor's office, how important it is to especially hardworking middle-class folks in Iowa. The median income in Iowa, according to my statistics, is $55,000 per household. And you're asking a 35% increase in tuition over 5 years. I'll guarantee you they're not going to see a 35% increase in that median income. It's irresponsible to ask that much of hardworking parents supporting their children to get a college education, to have a better life than they did, and to put it all on the backs of them. They're working hard. They need you to stand up and advocate for the students here at the University of Iowa, Iowa State University, and UNI. I guess, in closing, predictable. I saw that, and it almost offends me. Predictable is the best we can do. How about responsible, affordable? Okay, so that's what I would ask you to go back to the drawing board. I know it's not going to be easy. We have some work to do in Des Moines that's not going to be easy. But we need to reprioritize our budget. You heard Senator Bolcom, there's a lot of dollars in our $7 billion budget. We need to reprioritize, because when I went to school in the mid-'80s, you saw the statistic. About 60% of our tuition was supported by the state, and 30% by the student and their family through tuition. Now we've reversed that. So thank you for your hard work, and I look forward to working with you in the upcoming months.
Thank you, Senator Bowman.
Good afternoon again. I'm State Representative Cindy Winkler, and I live in Davenport, serve House District 90. I've been ranking member or chair of the Education Budget Subcommittee for a number of years, and I want to give a little bit of perspective now that I've heard all three presentations. One of the things that came out of University of Northern Iowa was the request for differential tuition. The fact that the students attending University of Northern Iowa are there for a different purpose in many ways than the students that attend University of Iowa or Iowa State University. So I hope that you take that request seriously as you move forward with the decision around tuition. The other thing that I want to again highlight is the fact that we have students in the pipeline that are in a much different financial situation than they were 10 years ago. Within that 10-year period of time, our free and reduced lunch numbers have increased by 10%. They're now at 41% of our students in the K-12 system have qualified for free and reduced lunch. That puts an additional burden on financial aid. And right now, we're not doing the state, talking about the state and the appropriations, we're not doing what we could do, what we should do for financial aid for our public institutions. Looking at 2015 numbers, there was $48 million appropriated for the Iowa tuition grant, and there was $2.2 million appropriated for the All Iowa Opportunity Scholarship, which is the only scholarship that our Regent University students would qualify for need-based. We need to not take away from our Iowa tuition grant, but certainly step up to the plate with our public universities. And I will do everything I can as a member of the legislature to partner with you in making that decision. The other thing that we need to think about is the Future Ready Iowa report identifies or has as a goal that we will need to increase our percent of post-secondary certified individuals up to 70%, and now we are only at 47%. 150,000 more individuals need to be in the pipeline and be completers of certified programs of 2-year degrees or 4-year degrees by 2025. It does impact our Regent universities or our higher ed institutions. 31,000 of those individuals will need a bachelor's degree or greater. So we do need to think about what our responsibilities are, not right now, but what our responsibilities are if we are ever going to meet the workplace needs of the future. We have a big job to do. When we look at 2000 and the appropriation in 2000, there was about 11.5% of our state general fund appropriation going to higher education. And although our budget has increased by approximately $3.5 billion, the state appropriation for our Regent universities for FY17 was $57 million below 2000 level. And so we're only appropriating about 6.8% of that general fund budget toward our higher education Regent general aid. I appreciate the job that you have ahead of you. I thank you so much for being willing to look at this. I think it's an important role that you are playing at this particular time. It is a timely role that you are playing, and I'll do everything I can, and I know that the legislators will work very hard to meet you and join you in meeting that responsibility.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, you and everyone in the audience. My name is Dave Jacoby, State Representative from Coralville. I'm here to listen, and that's what I'm doing. I have two observations. The first one, when President Harold referenced the movie The Paper Chase, half of the audience shook their head, yeah, great movie, and the other half said, what the hell is that? So we see an age cohort here in the audience, and I appreciate the students' comments coming from students that I'm listening to. The other observation, quite frankly, is in a move for us to work across the aisle. I'm not seeing a single person from across the aisle who's attending today's meeting, and that concerns me, because this is something that concerns all Iowans, and there's absolutely no reason someone from the other party isn't here today to listen to you and to the students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Nope, good afternoon. My name is Vicki Lensing, and I'm a representative from here in Iowa City. And thank you all for being here and all the work that's gone into these reports at all three universities. And my colleagues have all thrown numbers at you. I think I'm going to come from more of an emotional point of view. I'm a third-generation graduate of the University of Iowa. And I know when my grandfather attended how hard it was for him to put the money together. Listening to students now and living in Iowa City, we get the opportunity to interact with a lot of students because they are working 2 and 3 jobs to afford this education that they have chosen. I know that it's a burden for a lot of kids, and not just from rural Iowa, from all over, but they are choosing education because it's important to them. And as Iowans, it used to be important to us. It used to be the backbone that we all wanted good education, K through 12 and higher ed for our kids. And we, as elected officials, haven't really followed through on that. So I think it comes to education that we, partnering with you, need to do. Because Iowans, legislators, we all need to understand what the contribution is from our students when they attend one of our fine universities and then come back into the state as adults, as citizens, as employees. And when you talked, President Harold, about the economic impact, it definitely is. I think of the College of Dentistry, the College of Pharmacy, probably others at UNI, certainly the teachers that they give back to the state of Iowa. These are people that we know and interact with all the time, and they are graduates. And Representative Winkler talked about the pipeline. We have a responsibility to those students in the pipeline, not only to educate them, but to keep them here, because that is our economic opportunity. So I think, just in the years that I have served, we don't do a good enough job in telling Iowans the values that we have at our universities and what that gives back to the state as a whole. So we need to tell Iowans, and we need to work on our legislators and our governor, because they're the ones that make the decisions. And I'm sorry those decisions have not been very good ones over the last almost 20 years that I've been in. We have underfunded education at all levels, which, if you think that it's one of our prime values, we're not following through. So I think we need to pick up the slack, not just the legislators at all of the Regents universities, communities, but I think as a whole we need to pick up the slack and tell Iowans how important this is. And yes, it's going to be painful, but it's worth it. And there's going to be sacrifices we have to, as legislators, pick and choose where the dollars go. And I think we need to continue, or maybe step up, the way we fund education. So I'm asking you to help work with us to let Iowans know, but also legislators, besides the ones that you've probably met at the meetings you've had, we need to understand how important this is. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Bob?
Thank you. As the last and most senior legislator here, I'm State Senator Bob Dvorsky from Coralville, and I think I've made it a practice of supporting the Regents my entire career in the legislature. And I'm sorry we've come to this sad day where we're talking about 35% increase in tuition because the legislature won't fund us. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think as Senator Bolcom, I wouldn't say you're throwing in the towel, but you certainly need to couple this recommendation with, I think, a larger lobbying effort and everything. I mean, all of you, as we said, we all confirmed all of you. A number of you are members of the party that is not funding education. I think you need to talk to everyone who's in charge now of the legislature and work with our Hawkeye Nation groups and our Panther Nation groups and our Cyclone Nation groups and really make an effort to say how important, as they said earlier, what is the value of an education, a public university in the state of Iowa. We need that to be made clear, and we need the people to understand why are we not funding that then. I think you really need to couple any sort of increase in tuition with a broader appeal to the people in the state of Iowa, because education has always been number one. It isn't right now, and we need your help. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Senator. Other comments?
General comment?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm David Johnson. I'm Dean of Dentistry. My first words out are thank you for your attention to this, because I think it will address the undergraduate experience. And I think it's important to pause and realize what we have here. And I think we have something really very precious. If you look at Iowa's undergraduates, something like 70% of them aspire to graduate and professional school. And those kids are here, those students are here, quit calling them kids. Those students are here because they know that if they want to get into a graduate or professional school, the University of Iowa is a place to come. And I think it's important that somewhere in the state of Iowa, we have a place where valedictorians, salutatorians, I was in Southwest Iowa recently talking with Representative Moore in a coffee shop, and he was telling me about a young man that had graduated from a small high school, valedictorian of his class, came to dental school and is now back practicing in that area. So I think it's important there's a place in Iowa that kids, valedictorian, salutatorian, qualified people, first generation people, all can come here. I think they're here for a couple of reasons. One is the faculty, and two is the other students that know that they're here. I think the peer group is a really important thing that we need. And so the faculty, they're here because they know this faculty can teach them how to think. And this faculty can work with them to get them to get the skills they need to get into graduate or professional school. And I think that's why they're here. So I think it's important that we are able to support the faculty as has been presented here, and I think it's a very precious thing. I know there's some things to deal with. Student financial aid, particularly need-based student financial aid. We have things to deal with how do we keep the faculty? How many tenured faculty do we need, and so on. I know there are huge issues to deal with. As dean of a professional school, I have a huge interest in this because we want kids students coming to us that can think critically and analytically. Half of what we teach today is out of date in 5 years, and I don't know which half all the time. So we need people that can come in ready to adapt to the life that's going to come in the future, and I think they can get that. The students are telling us, I can get that at the University of Iowa. I hope we keep that. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Hi, I'm Ed Wasserman. I'm not an Iowan, but I've lived here long enough to feel like one. I've taught here for 45 years. I've been Faculty Senate President. I'm a winner of the Regents Award for Faculty Excellence, and I've participated in faculty governance for some time, and I know a little bit about this school. Every past president of the University of Iowa has deemed the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences to be the heart of the institution. So did the legislature when they established the university, defining its mission by statute as providing a liberal education and thorough knowledge of the different branches of literature, the arts, and sciences, and their varied applications. Unfortunately, over the past 20 years, dwindling state support has caused the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences to lose 70 faculty members, tenured and tenure-track faculty. at the same time that undergraduate enrollments have soared by nearly 5,500 students. The numbers again, loss of 70 faculty, tenure-track faculty, and gain of 5,500 undergraduates. To help contend with these conflicting trends, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences has had to hire increasing numbers of adjunct and temporary faculty. These individuals provide excellent classroom instruction, but they're not in a position to provide the research and artistic experience that is necessary for many of our students to succeed in their post-baccalaureate training and careers, and Dean Johnson just referred to that fact. It's essential for the success of our students that whatever tuition increases we enact, that the money that the students are bringing into the university more directly go to their education. The facts of the matter are pretty paralyzing, and in fact, I was paralyzed by this when it happened. In 2003, I talked to President Harold about this. We enacted a 19% tuition increase. You can check. It was predicated on bringing in as many as 50 new faculty into the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. We brought in 0. And the reason is those tuition monies were diverted by our administration to other needs on campus. Whatever we do in terms of tuition increases, it's essential that we direct the majority of those monies to enriching and enhancing the experience of our undergraduates. They're not brought here to fund the rest of the university. They're brought here to gain an education for themselves. And we owe them the obligation of giving them the best darn education we can give them. My 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lillian Sanchez, and I currently serve as the Vice President of the University of Iowa Student Body. I want to start off by thanking the Board of Regents Tuition Task Force for not only convening this group, but for allowing us comments on this very important topic. At this point, President Simpson has delineated important points that we think this task force ought to consider as you move forward with the creation of a 5-year tuition task plan. With that said, I would like to take a step back to offer a more humane perspective, focusing on the student perspective, that may help shape this plan. I will begin by sharing a little bit about my personal story, because I believe that there are many others out there similar to mine. I come from a single-parent household composed of my mother, my younger sister, and myself. I am the first in my family to have graduated high school, and hopefully in May, graduate from college. Frankly, college for me was not always a possibility. The expectations from my family and myself were there's no doubt about that. But the reality was that the logistics seemed to be at odds with my dream. Higher education was too expensive. Because of that, my college preparation, like many others, consisted of doing well in school, not only so that I could be accepted, but also so that I could make myself a competitive applicant so I would receive the sufficient financial aid to help me graduate. To achieve this, I enrolled in advanced placement courses, I worked about 4 jobs each year to save money, and I participated in a variety of extracurricular activities ranging from art to sports to music, of course, when time permitted. I sacrificed spending time with my family and countless hours of sleep because I knew how important graduating from college would be in setting myself and my family up for a better position. When junior year came around and my peers began to apply for schools, I was scared. At the time, I was left with the reality that the only way to attend college was with the possibility of drowning in debt, even with the money I had saved. As a first-generation student, I was unaware of the opportunities that could help me pursue my dream. With help from mentors, I applied to 11 different schools, 8 out-of-state schools, and 3 in-state schools. In the end, it was the University of Iowa that captured my heart and attention. It met my needs. Not only did the University of Iowa offer a world-class education with competitive, excellent, and rigorous academic programs, but it was affordable enough for me to attend by offering both need-based and merit-based scholarships, as well as the opportunity to participate in the work-study program. Moreover, I was able to find community here. This was a place where the staff and faculty cared for my academic, personal, and professional success. I found a home away from home. My story is not unique to me. Many others share this story of resilience, persistence, hard work, and determination. Many first-generation, low-income, and underrepresented students dream of attending a school like the University of Iowa. But the truth is, this American dream of pursuing higher education is becoming less and less feasible. If we continue in the direction we're heading, I fear that the University of Iowa will no longer be an affordable public institution. We need to remember that tuition is one of many major expenses our students face. At the University of Iowa, for example, many of our students are burdened with unaffordable housing expenses, and some even find themselves food insecure. For many students and families across the state, education is no longer just expensive. It is becoming unattainable. Our public institutions have the moral responsibility to continue offering affordable, accessible, world-class education for all students, and we must realize this as we craft and implement the 5-year tuition plan. As a student leader and proud Hawkeye, I understand the need to raise tuition in a time when our state continues to disinvest in higher public education. But I also understand and strongly believe in the need to implement a predictable plan that will continue to meet the needs of all students. This includes creating and maintaining sustainable and supportive need-based and merit-based financial plans, implementing the necessary and structural mechanisms to maintain and increase retention rates, and investing in institutional programs that maximize student success, programs that include experiential learning, research, and other high-impact practices. Thank you for all of your time, attention, and continual support for the University of Iowa.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lindsay Rayner, and I'm a senior here at the University of Iowa. I have 2 points I would like to display to you today. The first is a little bit of a perspective as what higher ed is now. My mother graduated, both my parents actually graduated from a high school where only 40% of the graduates were seeking a higher education or furthering their education in any capacity. I graduated from a high school where 90% of my graduating class, and that's around 600 people, are seeking a higher education. So we look at the economics and the job market we see today, and we understand the importance of obtaining that degree and how important it is in order for us to continue putting ourselves in a better place in this economy, that higher education is near a requirement. I'm a senior this year, and when looking at different job descriptions out there this summer, trying to plan for my post-grad life, I see a lot, usually the number one requirement is a bachelor's degree. So the importance of continuing to make this affordable and obtainable is essential to our growth and ability to exist in our marketplace. Something else that I wanted to touch on, I've obtained a lot of student leadership positions here on campus. I chose the University of Iowa because I felt that Iowa nice feel that is forever famous. I've served as an On-Iowa leader during our Welcome Week. I've worked as a Hawkeye guide for orientation services. So I understand and have hours and hours of trainings on how to help students transition to the university. And I've been continuously amazed by the different departments we have on campus that continue to work tirelessly to ensure that the students that we have here stay here. We also have an incredible admissions and recruitment process. The work they do gets those talented students on our campus, and I promise you we work very hard to keep them here. Something I have worked as a resident assistant, which I live in the residence halls and have residents from all over the country that I live with, basically, on the same floor. And something that I've seen myself struggle with over and over is that if a student is having trouble in a class, I can point them to the tutoring service. I can get them plugged in. If they want to be more connected, there's countless amount of student organizations that I can help bridge that gap into their integration onto campus. Something that I continuously struggle with, though, is their obtaining money. I can help them get to that scholarship website. I can help them with those applications. But when the totals don't add up, my hands are tied. And this is very frustrating, especially those personal relationships of essentially my floor mates and kind of my roommates in a sense. are forced to leave the university because they can't find that dollar amount. It's something very heartbreaking to me, and I've seen some of the most talented and students that inspire me to be better forced to leave the university to another institution because of those continuous dollar amounts. And I applaud you all for really looking at and understanding the long-term tuition plan, because I think if students are able to plan, they're able to really assess the situation, but continuously thinking about how we can make sure that students are getting the education they need in order to exist in our workforce is, bottom line, the most important. Thank you.
Thank you. Others?
Howdy, my name's Landon David Colquitt Elkine, but you can call me Landon Elkine for short. I'm a fourth year grad student, about to be my 5th year, and I don't have to pay tuition because of the fellowship I'm on, but I'm choosing to pay tuition so I can get a master's degree en route to my PhD, master's degree in math. So I'm looking at an $8,000 tuition bill, and you're telling me that that's going to go up quite a bit for people in the future who want to get an education like me, who follow after me and try to do the things I'm doing to try to make myself a more attractive candidate for this institution, to try to get hired somewhere so I can reflect well in this institution with scholarly work. You're making it harder. At least that seems to be the worst case and nightmare scenario. So I have a sort of question for you, which is, what are you going to do to make it easier for people like me that are just trying to get an education and believe in its value and try to reflect well in the institution? What are you going to do for people who have worked here for 4 years, going on 5? And I haven't seen any op-eds. I haven't seen you on the radio. I haven't heard you on the radio. I haven't heard much. I haven't heard you addressing large gatherings of Iowans. I haven't heard any lobbying, really. I've heard some sort of tepid statements from the Rastetter board, as if it was sort of a minor inconvenience. Oh no, we have to raise tuition again. But I don't really feel that this board is feeling our pain, as it were. And so I don't see any creative solutions to how to get more money from the state. This 5-year tuition plan seems like a failure of leadership on the Regent's part, to me. Now granted, I'm 26, so I haven't seen the world, and there's political realities that I'm not yet cynical enough to cognize. But it seems like one of your primary jobs is to make sure, as your mission states, that education is accessible and affordable. And a failure to get more state money is a failure on your part. So, President Harold's not empowered to seek tuition. His power is more limited than yours in seeking funds from the legislature. That's on you, to some respect. Either convince the legislators that are in office or to convince the people of Iowa of its value. And if the legislators, the Republicans, aren't showing up, who are in the legislature, why not go to the people? And to some extent, I think that's what the previous president before Rastetter did, and then Branstad forced him out. But at some point, you've got to face that music. You've got to pitch the university to the people of Iowa if the legislators aren't listening. Because this tuition plan is just a surrender, and it's a failure. And so I guess I'm just missing the leadership and the ideas from you all. And if you all don't, I understand you're 9 people, right? 6 of you are here today, but thank you. 9 of you can't go out and convince all of Iowa on your own, at least not easily, of the value of funding these institutions. So send us. A lot of grad students need summer funding. I would love to go out and talk to Iowans about the value of this education. I'd love to go and talk to people about telling them, hey, a patriotic American is an educated one. An outstanding Iowan is an educated one. And sit down and just tell people that that's important and what that means. And if you're not willing to do it, I'm happy to do it on the cheap. And there's other grad students like me who don't have summer funding and could do it. You could call it Teach for Iowa, just like Teach for America. I mean, that's one idea about how to convince and build that political will, to change the political reality you face. Because one political reality is the legislature's just not going to fund it. That seems like what this tuition plan is assuming. And that does seem to be the political reality for the past few years under Rastetter. And that's a failure of the board under his leadership. So, change the political reality. You can't just accept it. You're supposed to lead and defend these institutions. You're an independent agency. You aren't beholden to a party. You're supposed to defend the value of these things to Iowans on their behalf. If Republicans are defunding it, or Democrats, whoever's defunding it, call them out on it. But I'm not seeing any of that. So far as I can tell, there's not anything you're going to do to make it easier for people like me. There's going to be more tepid, sort of meek statements about how terrible it is we have to raise tuition, and then it's going to go up. And it's going to be harder for people like me. And I guess that's just a failure of the Regent's leadership. Your mission is to make sure it's accessible. It says it on your website. And I guess I don't see much, this plan is a rejection of that mission. So I don't know why the Regents are here if we're going to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Others?
Hi, I'm Brad Pector, a UI student. I just wanted to say that I echo a lot of what's been said by other students here today, and that you should consider that this is a week or two early in Iowa City time. And in a week or two, we'd have, half the population back and another 100 stories, out the door, and we'd be here for, another 15 hours. So I just think we should consider that and to listen to our students and local representatives. Thanks.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, it looks like it's getting along here to an hour anyway. Thank you all very much for coming and listening to presentations, and particularly those that commented. Those comments are essential to us when we get into our decision-making process. So appreciate you being here. Thank you.